kind of had some rough draws, to be honest, but he was, at a bit of a disadvantage anyway. And now he's going to have this advantageous matchup. So this should be probably pretty nice for him. Now, how do you feel he should play this? What exactly are you digging for as this hand lock?
Well, Mountain Giant's obviously a very crucial card. Yep. An 8/8 is tough for Rogue to deal with without having to burn a lot of cards.
Do you hold the Ancient Watcher?
And I mulligan the Ancient Watcher here, yeah. And one of the reasons it's so difficult for Rogue to come back after killing one of these 8/8s is by the time it lands an Auctioneer, it's had to use so many spells to deal with it. So Ancient Watcher isn't a threat at all. I can see him keeping it because there's a lot of... he already has a Mountain Giant in his hand, so does he need a second Mountain Giant? At this point, what he's thinking about is how important Shadow Flame is to this matchup. Yeah. If Kitkatz is able to land a Concealed Auctioneer. On turn 6, he's able to play this Ancient Watcher and then use Shadow Flame to kill it even though it's concealed. So that's a pretty important card. If he didn't have this Mountain Giant or a Twilight Drake, I think he mulligans it 100% of the time, but as it stands, I think he keeps it. Okay, so he's going to be keeping that, and he does have the Mountain Giant already in hand. Like you said, also a Sunfury Protector and the Shadow Flame. So pretty nice draws here, has to be said. He has the Taunt activatable, he has the Shadow Flame. Doesn't seem like there's any lag on Kitkatz's side, so I think this is actually just in the recording from Gnimsh. I think his computer was actually just lagging that much, which is a little bit weird. But anyway, it is going over. Hopefully that doesn't continue. It looks like, yeah, so weird. But anyway, shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now, obviously just going to ending turn, tapping up Thankfully, Hearthstone's a very micro-intense game. So this is like a brutal experience when you can't see these players like squash these pumpkins quite as quickly and regrow them. So a little bit of a minor inconvenience, but the point of the game is still getting across. So in this matchup, 2 Auctioneers is not what you want to see, but 1 Auctioneer definitely is what you want to see. So coming from his side of the board, he's really hoping his opponent doesn't have a turn 4 Twilight Drake or a turn 4 Mountain Giant. When you see those, it's a big disadvantage from the Rogue's perspective. If neither of those cards come into play, the Rogue is very able to steal these games. So something that you've been seeing from a lot of players when they play Miracle Rogue on something like Ladder is they'll actually include 1 copy of Big Game Hunter, and they'll use these Shadow Steps to help push through these big 8/8s that are coming out, and they're using that leverage to kind of put their opponent at 15 and then using Cold Bloods and Eviscerates to finish them off. So they don't have to use their Eviscerates early, and they have to use Shadow Steps instead, which sacrifices the 6 damage on Leroy, but oftentimes you find yourself behind taunts anyway, so you have to just burn through.
Makes a lot of sense. So he is just going to drop the Earthring Farseer here, heal up a little bit, and he is going to be able to set himself up for that turn 4 Mountain Giant. It is always kind of the turn 4 that you really have to be nervous about against these hand locks. And although, like you said, if they don't have one of those big cards to play, they often do though, because it works with the hero power. I mean, you're life tapping up. There's a super high chance of being able to have that, especially when you are playing that turn 2 position, because you have 4 cards that you start with. You can mulligan all 4 cards. That's already 8 cards that you're looking at. You have 9 on your turn 1. Then you get to life tap 3 times. I mean, you're looking through such a massive portion of your deck that you almost always are going to have one of those cards.
So something important to note, when Gnimsh plays this turn 3 Earthring Farseer, it's 2 effect to this. Number 1, he doesn't need a life tap.
Yep.
But number 2, he hopes to force some removal from it to help alleviate the amount of damage that can come onto this Mountain Giant. So Kitkatz here very diligently not playing his backstab because he knows he's going to be using this Gadgetzan Auctioneer and likely having to prep this sap that's in his hand. This is one of the key cards in this matchup as well. It enables him to be able to push through damage. So you're going to see backstab draw a card, preparation draw a card, and sap's going to draw a card. So he's going to put 3 more into his hand. Gnimsh is almost certainly going to respond with a Soulfire this next turn.
Now, he even has the Shiv, so do you think you prep the Shiv to finish this off, or do you take the 3 damage?
There's 2 ways to go about this. The first one is he knows that he's going to be using sap here. So the sap should be, in my opinion, the first thing he does.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But the way he draws after this is going to really influence it. If he draws another sap, I'd like to see him save the preparation.
Okay.
If he doesn't draw another sap, I'd like to see him use it instead.
All right, well, we'll see what he's going to do. He obviously could deadly poison up, but that would be a bit weird. So it'll be interesting to see if he wants to punch this or if he wants to go for the Shiv. Sitting at 27 HP, I mean, so you think he should just prep the Shiv at this point?
I think that digging into your deck is important at this point. You've used 1 sap. You need to find this second sap. Blade Flurry is also important in this matchup because if your opponent manages to do something like play a Mountain Giant, follow that with the Twilight Drake, and then taunt both of them, one of the easiest ways to push through that is with a really big Blade Flurry. So finding those cards is critical in this matchup. So his life is a resource at this point. He's not worried about dying from this Warlock deck. But more importantly, he needs to be mindful of the fact that he needs access to his tools in order to be able to finish this game. And that's what's seated in this prep Shiv right here. Wow, and there's the second sap.
Man. So that is going to be annoying for Gnimsh as he's going to put down that Mountain Giant once again, only to have it thrown right back in his face.
Look at the Kitkatz hand. He's got a lot of damage put together already. You're looking at Deadly Poison being 4 damage, Cold Blood's 4 more, Eviscerate's 4 more. He's got this SI7 agent, which is going to be coming down off the back of this next sap, I imagine. And then this Soulfire, if it discards this Molten Giant or this Siphon Life, it could be really bad news for Gnimsh.
Well, do you think, isn't he just going to play the Mountain Giant first, though?
He's definitely playing the Mountain Giant first. He has a Molten Giant in his hand as well.
My mistake, sorry.
So when Kitkatz, if he discards this Molten Giant,
Yep.
he sees that there's one less Molten Giant left, and he's likely to feel more comfortable pushing his opponent below the 15-point mark and then looking for burn the next turn. So this Soulfire is extremely important to this turn. He doesn't mind discarding, I think, any card in his hand other than the Siphon Life or the Molten Giant.
So we'll be Siphon Soul, I assume you mean. Yeah?
He's going to Soulfire
No,
this turn.
I'm saying he doesn't want to discard
Right,
the
he wants the
Soul.
Siphon Soul because he wants to have access to kill a second Auctioneer, which
No,
in his hand right now, he has Ancient Watcher Shadow Flame, but that's a lot of mana being put into it, and it's also sort of an investment being put into it as well. So I actually wouldn't even mind seeing him life tap here because he doesn't need to taunt this 8/8 up. He's not under any pressure right now. So when he keeps both of these Sun Fury Protectors and life taps instead, it's more spelling to the point that he doesn't want to discard Siphon Life or Molten Giant, but at the same time he needs to think about, what if I draw a second copy of Siphon Life or a second Molten Giant? It's going to increase the fact that I can discard one of those cards.
Yep, so it will be pretty interesting to see what he's going to go for here. He's actually looking at just going for the Ancient Watcher, and he is actually just going to drop the Ancient Watcher. Perhaps he doesn't want to risk losing that for Shadow Flame if it does get concealed or something like that. So considering doing this play here, and then probably going to go for the Soulfire. So
I think the coin is what he wants to discard more than anything. Or I'm sorry, the Mortal Coil.
The coin
Definitely
would
want
be
to
nice
discard the
too.
Mortal Coil.
This is Shadow Flame.
That's not one you want to discard.
Ouch.
But he still does have an 8/8 on the board.
Yep.
He's got this 4/5 on the board, which sort of the jig is up now. He knows that Shadow Flame's been discarded, but not in a comfortable position if your Kitkatz here. So this Mountain Giant needs to die. How do you kill it?
So you don't think you want to use the sap there?
I don't think that he wants to use the sap here because that's his second sap at this point.
Okay.
It's important to hold on to that one. I think it's likely that he's going to take 8 points of damage.
Yep, going to be able to do the Avis, the SI, and poke it in the face, and that is going to be that. So he will take that damage, and it definitely makes a lot of sense. He has the ability to kill that off now, so may as well save the sap for later, especially when you already have him low, you're going to have something to deal with those Molten Giants. He draws another Soulfire here now, and really doesn't have the best of plays, so he's going to have to tap it up. And he does have a Faceless Manipulator now, which is quite nice in combination with the Molten Giant when you get quite low.
Right.
He has that kind of that deadly combo. If you get below that kind of magic HP, if you get to 10 HP, Molten Giant's free. You can be able to Molten Giant, Faceless Manipulator, and throw out that Sun Fury Protector, which gets pretty powerful.
A lot of things to think about here. When this Sun Fury Protector comes down, he's only got 1 taunt available left in his hand. So this Soulfire, it's a good draw, but it can really come back to hurt him if Kitkatz manages to put himself in a winning position and Gnimsh is forced to use this Soulfire. So this 3/3 makes a pretty big impact on the board, and at the same time, he also doesn't want to overcommit. So this 4/5 taunt's really, really critical, but I don't think you're going to see him faceless this next turn, even though it's not a bad play. A 5-mana 4/5 taunt is a good deal, but he wants to avoid getting Blade Flurried, and he wants to avoid overcommitting to the board in a spot where he may need this Faceless Manipulator, as you said, to copy something like a Molten Giant.
Now, looking at getting rid of this, do you think you're just going to have to pay the price again, just go on into it, or I guess he's going to look for the draw first?
I think waiting here is a totally fine option. You're not under any pressure. You don't want to put your opponent too low. That second Shadow Step, I think, is very critical
with the Cold Blood as well
to this game. So I think he's likely to pay 3 life this turn, but I wouldn't be surprised if he waited. The only thing that would surprise me is if he played a Cold Blood to finish this off, because Cold Blood's one of the tools you can use not only to push through those last points of damage when you're on 9 mana, but also is really good for pushing through taunts when you don't have another way to deal with them.
Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense there. And he does have that kind of killer combo. He obviously needs to get some more damage out before he goes for it. Twilight Drake, not a bad draw there. But he still has to get some damage in, but he does have Leroy, Cold Blood, Shadow Step, Leroy, Shadow Step, Leroy, which is the ultimate combo, basically.
it's 22 points of damage.
Yeah.
So he's got to be mindful of his life total here. He feels comfortable at 24, and rightfully so. I think it's hard to put your opponent on such a big combination of those cards. Yep. Even though he's drawn some cards from Auctioneer, he's still not the deepest into his deck. So Leroy's a 1 copy of a card. If it happens to be like in the bottom 5 or 6 cards, there's no threat of Shadow Steps being lethal here.
No.
So
Do you Soulfire here?
I think you have to Soulfire. And
If he loses the Molten Giant, though, that's pretty brutal.
well, part of the reason he has to do this is because he doesn't want to sacrifice 4 points of damage,
Yeah.
and he also doesn't want to open his opponent up to be able to do something like backstab and eviscerate, which is going to take out this Twilight Drake in combination with a poke. Because again, Kitkatz he's falling low on life total, but it's not to say that he can't continue to use it this way.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if he didn't use his Soulfire, and if he doesn't use it, what it's telling me is he's hunting for lethal as soon as possible.
Well, I think he is going to go for it. It's just a scary scenario. You know, it's game 5 here. One little stroke of bad luck could end the game with the Soulfire.
We saw him not use a backstab earlier
Yep.
to potentially kill a minion, and it ended up coming back to haunt him, and that might be on his mind as well. But
So he's going to go for it.
Either
This
way,
is,
I
this is
still
the
like
moment
the
of truth,
Soulfire.
man. Let's see what he discards, and what is it going to be? And he loses Face Manipulator. You know, I'm sure
I
he
think
would have
you're happy
rather
with
lose
that.
the coin or the Mortal Coil, but not bad at all.
I think you don't want to lose your Sun Fury Protector, you don't want to lose your
Yep.
Molten Giant, and you don't want to use your Siphon Soul.
Yep.
So discarding anything
It's
other than those
fine.
cards, you're totally okay with it. I don't think your opponent's at 13. I don't think you need this Faceless to win. It'd be nice to be able to Faceless a Leroy, but he has to draw the Leroy first.
Yep, definitely. I mean, Faceless obviously on Molten Giant, very nice as well, but not a big deal. Now the question, how do you deal with this? I mean, at 13 HP, you can't really afford to ignore anything anymore. You can't leave this stuff on the board unless you're just going to try to go for a kill or something, because the problem here, obviously, is, you know, if a Leroy is in your opponent's hand, that's game. Power Overwhelming could be game as well. There's a lot of different ways that he could just end this game on the next turn.
Your opponent's used two Soulfires at this point.
Yep.
So their reach potential is now Hellfire, Power Overwhelming, and Leroy Jenkins.
Yep.
So he's at 13 right now. He's effectively at 7 because of these 2 minions on the board. So he has to deal with these in some way, unless he believes he's not going to be able to win the game otherwise. So because he's got these 2 Shadow Steps in his hand, you may see him set his opponent to somewhere around the 20 life mark and look to push through the game for there, and just kind of hope his opponent doesn't have a taunt. But sort of touching on what you were saying earlier, Defender of Argus is going to be 2 more damage as well, so that's going to leave him at 4. So it's something like even like Defender of Argus and Power Overwhelming could be game over in this position. So a lot to think about for Kitkatz, and this is one of those turns where you see something like the rope come into effect, because Miracle Rogue takes a long time for its animations to finish. So if he decides that he's going to go with Gadget and Auctioneer here, he needs to do it, and he's got to keep going through his motions. He doesn't have enough time to think because the rope's
He's
been
going for the
inputted in
sap,
these
man.
tournaments.
So I think this is pretty ballsy, but really he doesn't have a lot of other answers. He kind of has to sap this. He can't really decide to, he can't just kill through it, and at the same time, he can't really just ignore it because he's too low on HP. So he's kind of forced into this scenario. Do you think he drops the Cold Blood now on his Auctioneer? Or do you think he's just going to hold on to that for the next turn?
I think he needs to save it, and the reason he wants to save it is because Gnimsh may feel comfortable at 23 health
And next turn he's
fail,
dead to Auctioneer plus
and
combo.
fail to actually taunt up this turn. So it's important that he either heals or that he taunts up this turn. So he needs to kill this Auctioneer, obviously. He has a very easy way to do it, but he has this Owl in his hand too. So if he can be greedy a little
Oh,
bit,
he's life tapping, man.
and
Oh,
Kitkat's
God.
going to be on the back of this. This life tap, I think.
Well, if he life taps and Soul Siphons, he's fine. He's still above the range. Oh, and he gets the wow. So that's actually a pretty nice draw. But do you think he Soul Siphons here? Because if he doesn't heal, if he just plays his Drake and doesn't taunt it, tries to save that for the Molten Giant, he's dead. If he
doesn't Siphon Soul here, you're really opening up your potential to just outright lose the game.
Even if he Farseers, he's still dead. If he doesn't taunt or clear this.
He's got to do something about this Auctioneer, because if for no other reason, he doesn't want Kitkatz to be finding more poisons and Blade Flurries.
Yep.
So I'd be extremely hard pressed to not see Siphon Soul coming out here, and I think his life tap is indicative of that.
Yeah, definitely would make a lot of sense, but he's mousing over the Twilight Drake. Twilight Drake plus a taunt would also keep him alive, but I think that Soul Siphon makes a lot of sense.
Again,
Gotta get rid of that.
it opens him up to Blade Flurry, which is the major issue, so
Yeah.
that's why he settles to go with Siphon Soul here.
So
This
here
also
we go.
denies draws.
And he's going to be back up to 24 HP. So with that, he should be okay. Remember, there's 23 damage, actually, they could do right there, because he has the dagger. Ooh, double Cold Blood, but
Oh
he doesn't
my
have enough
gosh.
mana to play it.
18, 22, 23
Yeah,
damage,
it's 23.
one short of lethal. Every point mattering this game. And so now you're
He
in
has the Abyss, though. I think he just does it this turn and then just says, I'll kill you next turn. Or, actually, the smarter move would maybe be to just Abyss now. I don't know, because there's no taunts right now. And I think you have to do it first and then it's
your
just kill him.
play makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And here's why.
Because the taunt could come down if you get him too low.
If he puts his
free
opponent at 1
taunts.
health, even if he manages to Earth and Ring Farseer, you have Blood Mage to push through with the Eviscerate, and you also have Shiv to back that up.
Yep.
Not going for a Leroy here, I think, is strictly a mistake.
Yeah.
The thing that
I
he's
think you have
thinking
to.
about, if he doesn't Leroy, is he's thinking about Hellfire and Leroy
Yeah.
Jenkins. So if your opponent plays Leroy Jenkins, that's now 10 points of damage they get because of the 2 whelps being on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And at that, actually, we're stupid. He's going to get 6 whelps from this Leroy Jenkins if he decides to Shadow Step it a bunch of times.
Yeah.
So at that point, 6 plus 2, you're looking at 8. He dies to a Hellfire alone.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty tough turn for him. You could also do something like Leroy and double Cold Blood, put your opponent at 14,
And then
put
just
him down,
Shadow Step it back
put
in
him
your
down to
hand.
the 13 from the dagger, and then either hope to draw an Eviscerate and finish him on the back of this Blood Mage, maybe, or maybe you just Shadow Step it once and
But
you play it.
If you do that, then a taunt comes out, then you lose because
Right,
you can't
so-
get through the taunt. So I feel like that's the only real play.
I
Because
think he's got to Shadow Step once and use 2 Cold Bloods. That's what I think.
well, how much damage would that be then?
So that's,
that would be
that's 21
12, that would
damage
be
right now. So
21.
it leaves your opponent at 3. So even if they heal for 3 from an Earthen Ring Farseer, you
Then
have
you can
6 points of
still-
damage in your
yeah.
hand with the Blood Mage. So
That's true.
I like that play a lot. There is risk involved in it. Again, Leroy and Hellfire is going to kill you on the backswing, but you know that your opponent's got a Twilight Drake in their hand. They haven't played a Defender of Argus this game. They still
Second
have
Soul
a
Siphon would probably lose you the game as well, though, right?
No, because that only heals him for 3. So he'd have to have a second Siphon Soul and an Earthen Ring Farseer at that point to put him at 9. And then even if he puts him at 9, he's still
Yeah.
got a little points of damage in his deck, and he gets 2 draws at it between the Shiv and
Well, he's
the
thinking about the
Eviscerate.
Blood
So
Mage. Ooh.
this is a really tough turn to go through.
Either way, I
And
feel
again,
like
working
he
on
has to
limited
play
time.
the Leroy.
Yeah.
I feel like if he does, sure he can do Blood Mage Abyss or whatever and put him kind of low, but then if the taunt comes out, your Leroy is ineffective, and I think that's what he's going to go for, and I think it's a mistake. And this I think is going to
no.
cost him the game, man. We'll see. He's going to go for it, almost guaranteed. He's going to Shiv Abyss, and he's going to put him in range to be killed by the combo next time. But if the taunts come out, that's game. That's done pretty much.
Yep.
And I mean, he made the mistake last game with the big game hunter, not using that, getting kind of greedy. And now I feel like he's getting kind of greedy again.
He does deal with the 2/3, but he opens himself to Mortal Core this turn. So I think what he's looking for is on the back of these Cold Bloods. He wants to push through a taunt and go from there. But gosh, I don't know. I like the Leroy play and just kind of YOLOing it.
Oh,
The
man,
Leroy play
Leroy.
would have lost him the game. So
Yeah.
maybe perhaps his understanding of Gnimsh's luck coming into play here as well. This isn't quite enough for lethal if you're Gnimsh now, but you have a lot of options, and I think a lot of them are pretty safe. I don't mind seeing an owl a Twilight Drake followed by an owl, a Mortal Coil into this 1/1 to deny your opponent a draw and then to taunt up. But at the same time, that Twilight Drake is now going to threaten lethal. So Kitkatz has got to find a way to deal with this also.
Yeah.
But he's got no saps left. He just used an Eviscerate. He just used a Shiv. So he's looking at something like Backstab or having to have a charge minion to double Cold Blood to push through this taunt. And he gets kind of lucky that I think the setup for the kill next turn with the burn is a better play.
Yeah.
And so in this instance, he did get lucky because he avoided a counter lethal. But there's a lot of cards out of Gnimsh's deck that can be lethal too. Like say he has 2 Hellfires in his hand.
Yeah.
Kitkatz doesn't know this, but Gnimsh isn't even actually playing Hellfire. He's gone with Sunwalker instead. So this is where those mind games come into effect also when you're playing at these high levels, is that Gnimsh is just aware that his opponents are mindful of Hellfire and tend to play around it.
Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. But either way, I still think the Leroy was kind of the right play because I just failed to see how he wins in this scenario, really. I just feel like if this gets taunted up, which very likely it's going to, how do you ever kind of get through it? I mean, maybe he's not going to taunt it up. Maybe I'm completely wrong. And we may kind of have a little egg on our face after this because
Right.
if he doesn't taunt, he doesn't heal, he could still die here.
Yeah, he's got to taunt this up.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way that he's life tapping here, playing a 4/10 and then not taunting
Yeah,
up.
he's gotta
I think it's
taunt it.
impossible. So,
But
but again, he's so far into his deck that it's like, is your opponent's likely to taunt up? That's really where I'm
Yeah.
looking at it from, is that angle. So,
that's kind of how I see it as well. It's just to me, how are you ever going to get through the taunt?
Yeah.
It's like I just don't see you. There's no more ways for him to get through the taunt. So when this comes out, that's kind of like Heartbreak Hotel, man. How do you get through that without using your Leroy? And if you use your Leroy, how do you kill him after?
Yeah.
So I mean, Deadly Poison. We'll see what he can do if he can work some magic here. I mean, is there
So he
really?
can't take any more damage.
Yeah.
He can only deal 7 unless he wants to use his Leroy or use part of his life total. So he'll fall down to 5. He can heal back up to 8, but then Leroy's lethal on the back of that. I think it's probably the play he's going to end up going with, but we know that it's going to be game over to Gnimsh if that's what he likes to do, and it looks like that's what he wants to do when he's reaching for this Earthen Ring Farseer.
Yeah, I think that's going to be it, man. But Either way, he would have lost. You know,
Sure.
If he went with the other play, even though we both kind of think it might have been the better play, wouldn't have mattered. Leroy was top decked, so he would have died to that anyway. So either way, I think, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't, kind of in this scenario. It's definitely very tough. And we've seen a lot of really hard choices, I feel like, in this Tavern Takeover. I think more than in the previous one.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The choices here have been absolutely brutal. You know, another thing he may do is he may use this Leroy here to clear this, understanding that he can't pay this life total, and try to use something like these Shadow Steps on these SI7 agents to try to push through for the last points of damage. But it's going to be tough.
Well, the SI looks like it's going to come out, so it probably is just going to be the Deadly Poison.
Yeah, it's going to be SI, Shadow Step, SI into Deadly Poison.
Yeah. Alrighty, so we will see how this is going to work out for him. That is going to put it down to 4 HP.
Ooh, he could also double Shadow Step this SI. That's an option as well.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's going to do it. Gnimsh, a little bit of luck and a lot of good play. And on the back of what perhaps might have been slight mistakes in this game. Either way, this is a bad matchup for Miracle Rogue. And everyone knows it who's been playing Miracle Rogue against this Handlock deck. And everyone who's been playing Handlock is thrilled to the teeth when they see them queued up against a Rogue. So a great series going over to Gnimsh here on the back of this Leroy Jenkins. Unfortunately, it's not gold. And at least Kitkatz has got chicken as well. So, you know, you walk away from this match, you're a little bit disappointed.
Yep.
But you can look back and learn a lot from it, too. And again, he's got some chicken to go with it.
And, well, I mean, that's a fair point. But, you know, he also, I think more importantly, beat the previous champion,
Right.
Which is pretty nice. You know, he is going to be knocked down into the bronze match because it is single elimination. If you're in the first round, you get knocked out, you're done. But getting knocked down in the semifinals means he still has a chance to get top 3.
Right.
You know, playing for pride there. Well played, called. The Leroy going to be dropped, I do believe.
Respect from both of these players here. Again, they respect each other's games a lot. But, you know, when you're Kitkatz, I think a lot of this might have also been from last game. That one mental misstep, that may be weighing on his mind as well. So if that's weighing on his mind, it's going to help break his concentration a little bit.
Yeah.
And that could be a factor into that turn as well.
And I mean, it was a 3-2, man. And that one turn definitely made a huge difference in this series. Either way, it is going to be Gnimsh claiming victory there over Kitkatz. Kitkatz going to go down. And that is the last deck getting locked right there. And that is a 3-2 victory for Gnimsh. And well played to him. That means